episode of the Boy Time Podcast. I'm Joe Pilato. As always, I'm joined by Bebby. Oh, spooky intro. But I guess that's fitting because this is our first week in the horror marathon. Not so much. I don't know. My movies aren't really horror movies, um, or at least they aren't very scary. I don't know. You're doing albums, so I don't know
hmm
what yours have been like, but at least so far, the two movies that I've seen were not very scary, but they were very good. So that'll be very nice. I'm doing the Romero-ween, which I'm sure no one's ever done before. I'm assuming I'm the first person to ever do a mini
Pretty niche
marathon.
director.
I know not a lot of people know about him, so I just decided, hey, I'm missing a lot of his filmography, but the stuff that I've seen, I've absolutely loved. Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, both great movies, and George Romero is a very interesting person, in like the cultural zeitgeist that exists in the world. So I thought, hey, let's just do that. So let me just check that there is. I have a feeling we might have some news to get out of the way. Oh, yeah. In big, giant, bold letters, Daniel Day Lewis is officially ending retirement. Um, yes, I think this came as a shock to many, including myself, because after 2017's Phantom Thread, Daniel Day Lewis said he was done. I don't think I've seen all of his movies, but pretty much everything he's been in, I've absolutely loved. Easily, probably one of the best actors of all time. And he's coming back, and it's for a great reason. His son is making a movie, and so Daniel Day Lewis is going to be in it. Um, I think it's actually going to be like a movie centering on a father-son relationship, so it's almost kind of meta in that way. It's called Anemone, like the thing that clownfish swim in. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all the details we know right now. But that was like a big thing this week is that Daniel Day Lewis is back, baby. So that's pretty fun and exciting. But I think without further ado, let's just jump into the actual movie reviews. Because I have seen a couple movies. I watched three movies all in a row. And then I've just been crazy busy. I moved to the Great White North. And so I've just been very busy. And that's why there wasn't a podcast episode last week. But I guess we'll start with our Romero-ween picture that I watched, which is Day of the Dead, the last, or I guess kind of the last entry in George Romero's Dead trilogy. Of course, Night of the Living Dead is first, uh, which was co created by a man named John Russo. For whatever reason, John Russo retains the rights to Of the Living Dead, so that when George Romero made the sequel, he had to call it Dawn of the Dead. I guess that's a legal loophole. So as long as you say, as long as it wasn't Dawn of the Living Dead, then it's okay. But I think Dawn of the Dead rolls off the tongue better. And that movie is very different from Return of the Living Dead. Um, but what's interesting about this trilogy, really, is that both Dawn of the Dead and Night of the Living Dead kind of take place right at the beginning of the zombie apocalypse. I think Night of the Living Dead, you actually see not a lot of before the zombie apocalypse, and really that movie's not really about the zombies that much. Um, but then Dawn of the Dead definitely is, and that movie's great because it's like that one goes more step by step, where it's like, what would you do if there was a zombie apocalypse? Well, I would go to a big old shopping mall and then get all the food that's there and all the water, and that's it's just very methodical, and that's kind of George Romero's whole thing. But I think over time, as he was making these movies, I think he was like, actually, I think humans kind of deserve to be wiped out. And I think that if there was a zombie apocalypse, it would just be in everybody's best interest. I guess not everybody, but like the planet's best interest for just the zombies to kind of have it. They should just have the planet. And over over time, throughout these movies, you can just definitely tell that George Romero is way more sympathetic to the mindless husks that are consuming human flesh than he is with actual humans, which is honestly fair. Because, Dawn of the Dead, there's a bunch of like terrible biker people, and like pretty much the only people that survive are the evil folks. And that definitely carries over into Day of the Dead, the third one, the one that I watched recently. Because this one takes place. I don't think it's specifically said, but it's a I'll just say way later than the other two. Pretty much, there's only a handful of people left on the planet. The only people alive right now are like, I guess, like secret government slash military personnel that were hidden away in underground bunkers. And they're just the only people that lived. And they only have lived because they made the conscious choice to shut everyone out. So therefore, pretty much everyone in these bunkers are like a bunch of like really bad people. They're comically evil, military people. Military people are just shown to be the worst, which, this movie was made in, I guess it was 1985. I was going to say it was like a 70s movie because it gives that vibe, but I think that's just kind of George Romero's shtick, is being kind of anti-military, anti-authoritarianism, whatever. So he definitely in this story where all humans are bad, he has more sympathy for the scientists, but even then the scientists are kind of fighting a losing battle where it's like we would have to be holed up in this bunker for years to find something that would cure people from zombification. And so it's basically a lost cause, which the military people figure out. But I guess we'll just dive a little bit into the plot. Um, basically, basically, kind of like Night of the Living Dead. Night of the Living Dead is a movie about a bunch of people stuck in a house while zombies are outside trying to get in. Day of the Dead is very similar, except instead of a house, it is an underground bunker. And instead of race relations, it's science versus military, where the scientists are all a group of people and the military are a group of people. And I guess we're well past the point of like, well, can they like cohabitate? Can they just live together in peace? Just kind of stay out of each other's business and only get together when they need to? Like that was like years ago or months ago or something. At this point, we're past the point of no return. The military has completely like taken over and seized power and is like ruling over the scientists with an iron fist. They're threatening to not only just like stop support of their scientific research, but just to straight up just strand them and and just basically leave them for dead. Let the zombies have at them. They're comically evil and power hungry, which is kind of the charm. Joe Pilato plays the I guess lieutenant, I think, because the movie starts and basically there was a sergeant or something. I don't know military ranks. I think sergeant is above lieutenant. Maybe not though. So I'm just gonna say general because that's the top and that's what I know. So there was a general that was there, and he was like kind of amicable. He was like, "Okay, let's hear the scientists out. Let's make sure that give them resources." That guy dies, and Joe Pilato takes over, and he's super evil. And then we're following a female scientist, which I thought was, I guess the '80s were kind of the era for like female-led horror movies because you got like Aliens and like Terminator 2. I guess most of James Cameron's kind of, oh, that's not really horror, but I guess the like last girl trope was a thing, but in this case, the protagonist actually has a lot of agency and is kind of the leader of the scientist faction, which is kind of interesting to see. So yeah, I don't know. I don't feel like there's a whole lot to talk about with this movie as much as there is in Night of the Living Dead or Dawn of the Dead, mainly because of how like thought out and methodical it is. Day of the Dead is kind of just wallowing in societal collapse until a big action scene. But I think the most interesting thing about this movie is that one of the scientists is running an experiment basically trying to domesticate zombies. Basically, it's realized that and somewhere in the like brain of a zombie, there is like a dormant personality of the person that was once in there before but is no longer. They're basically operating on animal instincts, just wanting to feed and eat, despite being dead. But somewhere in there, you can kind of tap into it, and if you do it, then the zombies will actually not be hostile. Um, and so that's kind of like the big sympathy that George Romero's like, see, they aren't monsters. It's like there's a heart in there somewhere, and if we teamed up together, we could like crack it out and like live in harmony. But of course, the military sees these advancements and wants to shut it all down. But I will say that the guy who plays the zombie that the scientist is trying to tame, that zombie's name is Bub. I think it's like the scientist's dad's name or something, which kind of makes it weird, but it's fine. Um, and so like you can tell that like he's like beginning to share a bond with the scientist, and at one point the I guess slight spoilers, but at one point that scientist does die, and the zombie actually avenges his death in like in a deliberate way. You can tell it wasn't just like a zombie just being a zombie and just wanting to eat the person that killed the scientist. It was very, you know, deliberate, and there's like you can tell mainly because he wasn't using his hands or his teeth or something, and he shot him with a gun. And I think that would pretty much do it. That's like, well, that's that's a zombie. That's a zombie with a little bit of intellect at least. And so there's something in there. But I think overall this movie was really, really great. I really loved the depressing nature of it. But I'm always a fan of that. And that's kind of why I really like the Romero zombie movies more than most other zombie movies. Because I think Romero was kind of depressed and like sick of the world, and he just kind of like made these movies to get those feelings out of his chest. It's like, oh, I kind of like it, and he's very effective in how he does it and how he writes the characters and the scenarios and everything. Very, very smart guy, that George Romero. So if you have not checked out Day of the Dead and you have seen Night of the Living Dead or Dawn of the Dead, or if you haven't seen them, I would highly recommend it. It's very good. It's just like not as big a movie to talk about as Dawn of the Dead or Night of the Living Dead. Even then, Night of the Living Dead still blows Dawn of the Dead out of the water in terms of like stuff to talk about, because that is just a very dense movie in terms of its like theming and stuff. But this is not a discussion about Night of the Living Dead. So check out Day of the Dead. But I decided, hey, I watched a zombie movie that was very sad and depressing. Let's do a zombie movie that's the opposite of that. So I watched the movie Reanimator, which I guess you could classify as a zombie movie. I guess it's technically a zombie movie, but it's also kind of like a mad scientist movie. Um, Basically, I think this movie has somewhat of like a cult status. Um, it's very it's it's a weird one. I don't really know how to like dive into this. But basically, Jeffrey Combs is like uh, a scientist, I guess. He's working in Miskatonic University in Arkham, Massachusetts, because this movie is not subtle at all. And it's like, I think it, I don't know if it's like deliberately an H.P. Lovecraft thing, but it feels, oh, okay, never mind. It's based on a story by H.P. Lovecraft. Okay, so that makes sense. Because Arkham, Massachusetts, if you don't know, it's a fictional town that H.P. Lovecraft made and put it in a bunch of his stories, and it's where the Arkham Asylum is from in the Batman film, the one Batman film that Arkham Asylum's in. So there you go, a little fun fact for you. But Reanimator, Jeffrey Combs, evil, not really evil. He's just kind of a weird guy who's basically been killing dogs and cats and reanimating their corpses. Um, or I guess, I don't know. I don't know if he's been killing them. I think he has been killing them. But I think also he's just been like finding dead animals and like bringing them back to life. And he's just like, I'm not able to get a sample that's like really great because, they've been dead for too long. Basically, I want the freshest sample that I can get. And so then someone just so happens to die, and then he, you know, just reanimates them, and it's terrible. Um, and yeah, I don't even know really how to talk about this movie because it's weird and uncomfortable. Because I think I'm just gonna get it out of the way. There's a scene where a zombie, a decapitated head, goes down on a woman who's tied up on a table, and uh, it's just as uncomfortable as you can imagine. And she is like screaming, and a zombie head is like groaning. It's so awkward. It's like so uncomfortable. I hated it so much. Um, but I feel like I have to at least talk about it because that's like the one thing that everybody knows about this movie is that it has that scene in it. Because basically, I guess the main character is just like Guy, and then he's in love with Lady, and Lady is the dean's daughter, and the mad scientist who is not Guy. Guy is just Guy, and he's our protagonist, but he doesn't matter at all, so I'm not going to bring him up ever again. But yeah, mad scientist is in this class, and he has this teacher, professor guy, who basically only got to where he is because he was ripping off people's ideas. Um, and he's also in love with Lady, Guy's girlfriend, the dean's daughter. He has like this uncomfortable relationship. It's very very creepy because the dude is like 50 and she's, I think in the movie she's meant to be like 19 or 20, so it's like very very weird, and he's like not really subtle at all about it. Um, so it's just kind of weird. Um, and so then once he dies and becomes a zombie, then he goes down on the lady, and um, I feel like that's pretty much all I have to say about Reanimator, because I don't honestly I don't really remember much of the movie besides that. I watched it like 2 weeks ago, and that's just the one scene that was like kind of in my head. I remember liking it, but I watched it so long ago I remember nothing else. So I apologize that I didn't do Reanimator justice, but if you would like, there's a whole Red Letter Media video on it. Actually, not a whole one because they do two movies and one of them is Reanimator. But check it out because they're going to be better at talking about this movie than I am. So check that one out. But I did watch one other movie, not a horror movie, but it is one that's in theaters right now, and it's one that I think that everyone should go see because it is great. And no, it is not Joker 2 or Megalopolis. I might go see those for this upcoming week, mainly because I've been hearing how terrible they are, and I would like to get in on that action. So maybe next week I'll be able to talk about Joker 2 and Megalopolis. Honestly, I'm I'm leaning on seeing Joker 2 over Megalopolis because that just Megalopolis just seems so overindulgent and like oh like I don't want to watch that. But Joker 2 seems like it's going to be a train wreck and I'm interested in that. Um, so that's what I want. And all of the right people are upset about Joker 2 being bad, and I like that too. So I want to support a project that I can support 100%. Um, but it's not one of those two. The movie that I saw was The Wild Robot, a heartwarming film about family, and that's what's so important about it. Um, yeah, I think I saw a trailer for this when I saw Inside Out 2. And when I saw it, I was like, I'm more excited to see this movie than I am to see Inside Out 2, which I am currently seated for. Um, and my assumption was correct because The Wild Robot, as of right now, is my movie of the year. Sorry, hundreds of beavers. You're very, very good, and everyone should see you too. But Wild Robot, to me, really speaks to my soul. So I really, really liked it. And I won't go too much into spoilers or anything, of course, but honestly, there's not a whole lot to spoil that isn't in the trailer. It's about a robot that washes up on an island, and it's a robot that, like, I guess does tasks for humans, but I guess the shipment got lost and it washes up on an island. The island is uninhabited by humans, but it is inhabited by a bunch of North American forest critters. And so, it takes some time. It's very kind of like Iron Giant meets Big Hero 6, where it's like Iron Giant, you know, takes some time to get used to society, but then they all treat him as a hero at the end. Big Hero 6 is a robot that likes to help people. And so you kind of mishmash them when you get the wild robot. Um, Not necessarily a bad thing. It wears its inspirations on its sleeve. But I think what's really kind of pushing this movie for me is its art direction. This is pretty easily one of the most beautiful DreamWorks movies I've ever seen. Um, Honestly, maybe one of the best animated movies I've ever seen. Um, and I wrote a pretty long review for this movie on my letterbox, so I would recommend reading that if you're interested in full thoughts. But um, just to kind of sum up some of it, I think since Into the Spider Verse came out in 2018, I think we've seen a lot of like imitations of it. Some have been successful, like Puss in Boots. Some have been unsuccessful, or not as successful, I guess. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem, The Bad Guys. Like you can tell that these movies were just kind of like not necessarily aping off of Spider Verse's art style, but I think they were like, well, okay, so this kind of like lo-fi sketchy quality is in right now, without really understanding why that art style works so well for Spider Verse. Like, as much as I love Puss in Boots, there's really no reason for it to be animated in twos and in like some of the action sequences except that they are specifically trying to harken back to Spider Verse. Um, Again, I don't want to necessarily like slam those movies or anything, but this movie really takes the like inspiration from Spider Verse and really expands on it. Because it isn't going for that kind of like sketchy look. It's like almost like pastel and painted. Um, it kind of almost feels like Loving Vincent in a way, except it isn't actually like hand painted. But I just think that the art direction is especially, um, it's very prominent in this movie. There's not a lot of dialogue. not a lot of script, not a lot of story. It's very simple. But within the first like 2 minutes, you understand exactly what's going on. Where like the entire world, the natural world, is these kind of muted, pale, pastel colors. You have these like dark browns mixed with these kind of like yellowy greens, and kind of the edges aren't necessarily like super sharp. This isn't like a photorealistic Pixar movie where you can like clearly see the defined edges. It's also not a Spider-Verse movie where they actually have the outlines sometimes. And in the case of Across the Spider Verse, where they go full on weirdo mode there. Um, but it's kind of hazy on where the lines are, which is kind of like looking out in nature in real life. Whereas the robots, like kind of like whatever the render of it is very sharp with these big like neon yellows, pinks, and blues. The kind of metallic sheen that the robot has. It's very clear to the audience without one line of dialogue that this robot is out of place. And that's kind of the whole crux of the movie, is that, this robot enters a world that it is unfamiliar with, and you know, kind of learns to be accepted by it, and not even to be accepted by it, but just kind of like in defiance of like wanting to join the herd and like serve self-interest. It really kind of unites the whole forest in a kind of beautiful way, which I thought was just great. So, yeah, I don't want to go too much into story or anything because it is currently in theaters and I highly, highly recommend it. So, go check out The Wild Robot. Probably a top three DreamWorks for me. Nothing will beat my dear, dear Shrek 2, but I don't know. I think I might like it more than Shrek 1. So that's something. So yeah, that's The Wild Robot. Um, I think that's it for me. I'm going to pass it on over to Bebby for his long segment of the show.
Very long. It's October, which means I don't get a chance to breathe during any of this,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is a great time to have a Halloween marathon. um,
I
so,
forgot.
yes, I only did one Halloween one this time. I might double up next week, probably. It's still gonna be crazy next week though, so we will figure it out. Um, but we will start. I guess I have a concert review before I can do anything else.
Oh,
Um, I have a lot of stuff. But yeah, I went to see Foxing. When was that? two
Foxing.
weeks ago. Um, yes, went to see Foxing with my girlfriend. And that's a group that she has really been into for many years. They just released their self-titled album like a week before that concert, and it is a fantastic record, by far my favorite out of theirs. But they were touring with two openers from Indian Lakes, which is like an indie rock group, which is also one that I've been brought on to, which is pretty nice. And then there was a local band called Bug Moment. Fun name,
I like
fun
that.
band. But yeah, it was a fantastic show. Like I really, really, really enjoyed it. It was at a very kind of small niche venue. Lots of plants and pretty things. It was a very unique venue. It was really nice. Um, but all three acts did really great. Bug Moment is, I think, a band to kind of watch out for, honestly, because they did fantastic. Usually, when like you bring on local bands, it's kind of a toss up on what you're gonna get. Um, in terms of just quality, stage presence, all that. But they really felt very comfortable on stage. Their presence was great. They had a lot of great players as well. There was this one girl on guitar who was just like shredding the entire time, just like switching between like Midwest emo type riffs and just like all of these different patterns and things. And it was just like watching her do this for like the 35-minute like opener set. It's just really great. Um, they're like a full kind of Gen Z like indie rock mashed with like tiny elements of like hyper pop and online kind of music. Um, and there's a kind of tiny little tinge of emo in there. Obviously, this being a Foxing concert, there's definitely a tie in there. But it worked really well together. I don't think they have a full album out yet, but they do have a couple of EPs. So definitely worth your time. It was probably one of the most memorable like local act like opener that I've seen. Usually it's kind of like, oh, that was cool. But these guys were really fun. Um, the interludes they had included a like a Peter Griffin thing. For some reason they had like Peter Griffin sound bites as they were tuning their guitars for the next song. Um, they made a Five Nights at Freddy's joke at some point in there, which was really fun.
What is this?
Um, I don't know. It was great though. I enjoyed that. From Indian Lakes did great as well as an opener. Um, they definitely have more of like a kind of hazy, dreamy indie rock palette. Um, but guitar sounded great. I was wondering how they were going to do a lot of those effects and things live, and they pulled it off pretty great. But yeah, Foxing did fantastic. I think I found a newfound appreciation for the album that I already really enjoyed. But the energy on stage was fantastic. We were pretty close to barrier. We never go like too close to barrier at shows, but we're like, oh, why not? We'll do it for this time. And it definitely helps when you're like in a kind of emo rocky show with great energy. Um, Fantastic set list too. A lot of stuff from the new record, but they also included some older stuff in there. I think vocals were fantastic. I'm always like in awe of how these kind of like more emo bands kind of keep their voices live, because like you get the parts where it's more like screaming and then it's like more quiet parts, and throughout all of it it was just like perfect on like it could not tell a difference between that and the studio version when it comes to vocals, which is great. um, but yeah, there's a lot of great moments, crazy like insane intense moments, and then some slower tracks. He brought out the trumpet for a couple of them, which was just great. um, but yeah, fantastic show. It's been a while since I've had just more of a traditional kind of like rock show that isn't too big. I mean, I saw Swans and Santana this year so far, which is not really a normal concert by any means, either of them. Um, so this was kind of a good like grounding concert, and it was really nice. So that's a concert review. I don't know if I'm going to rate the concerts I've been to this year or not. I got one more still, so at least that I know of. But
Oh,
yeah, good stuff. Okay, getting into everything else. I think there's only one single to talk about throughout these 2 weeks. I could be missing something. I might miss a couple of things this week, but I don't think I will. There's just a lot of stuff coming out. So we got two singles actually. The Cure is back. First single off the new record that comes out November 1st. Alone, actually, it's like a 7 minute track. It's crazy. But definitely more reminiscent of like Disintegration Cure, which is, of course, the one I'm familiar with the most. But they really added more like an ethereal wave and shoegazy tinge to it, which is really great. It sounds updated for the year that we're in with the current trends that are happening, but it is also still the Cure, and you can tell it's a Cure song right away. Um, I don't know how Robert Smith sounds exactly the same as he did in 1989, but here we are. He does not look like it, that's for sure. I'm like, he looks very old. I know they've been touring a lot, so I know he's up for it. But like, I did not expect his voice to come out that clean. There's definitely processing on it and whatever, but like, it sounds good. Um, and the song in general is great. I mean, it's definitely plays in an atmosphere for half of it, and then we kind of have traditional vocal work and stuff. But the atmosphere they set up with those kind of more shoegazy, floaty elements that they're bringing in is really nice, and I'm excited for the new record. I'm interested to see like really what this thing ends up sounding like. I think it's always hard for a group that is this kind of they've been in the scene for a long time. I think it was their first album in a while. So I'm interested to see how this comes together. But they've been teasing it for years, so I'm assuming they worked quite a bit on this one. But yeah, this will be their first since 2008. So of course it's got to come out this year. Everything else is coming out this year. Yeah, I will have a full review for that whenever that'll be November 1st. That'll be another big week. Um, But I'm sure there might be another single. I feel like there's oh yeah, there is another single coming out. Friday. Actually, no, Wednesday.
Oh,
Perfect day for a single. Um, but yeah, I might be listening to that. I don't know how long the track list is. I usually try to check that before I listen to the singles. Um, but I might check that out because there's not enough music for me to already cover. Um, but yeah, really great, unexpected. Yeah, other single we have new Mount Erie single, uh, third from the new record. I saw another bird. He saw another one. Um, Nice little 2 minute track. I think it's really great. Um, I'm loving this kind of more rock sound he's going back towards. There's been like some big rock builds on two of the three singles so far, and they've just been really nice and cathartic. Um, I'm definitely like seeing this record as not like a really like a rebirth, but a return to form. Um, when it comes to like subject matter and not being in uh, the throes of grief that he has been in the past 5 or 6 years. Um, so really excited for this thing. All three of the singles are sounding fantastic. There's 26 tracks on the record, so I'm not afraid to listen to all three of the singles. And if there's another one, I'll listen to that one as well because I got 26 of these songs to go over when it comes out. Um, but yeah, I think all of them have been pretty fantastic. I think the songwriting is great. I love seeing his progression and kind of return to a more not Zen mind state, but just you know, back to feeling decent again, which is great. Um, but yeah, great stuff. I think we'll start with my spooky Halloween marathon album.
heyo.
Um, so for week one, I listened to Sun O Black One. This is the first Sun O release I've heard. Um, I've been meaning to check them out for a while. They are a drone metal, just drone in general group. Um, Very synonymous with Boris. I think they have a collab album or two, and then Earth as well, which I really enjoy Earth. So wanted to check this one out because this looked the spookiest based off of the cover and everything about it. Gave it a little bit more Halloween vibes. Um, and it's pretty solid. I feel like I don't have a whole lot to say about it in general. Um, that being because it is literally drone metal, there's not too much you can say about it. Um, but when it comes to building the aesthetic and vibe that I was looking for this marathon, it definitely succeeds in that. It is dark, it is very edgy. I do enjoy I feel like they really tried to set up like a cursed forest kind of realm for this because you get like wind noises and all these different weird things that come in. Um, the layering on the guitars is great. It is very thick and foreboding and brooding. Um, One step removed from probably like a horror game soundtrack, but it's definitely a little bit more intense than something like that. Um, I think it does turn out pretty good. I have to listen to it more to like really get in there, um, because with drone music you kind of have to turn it up loud and try to like find as much as you can in there to really get to. Um, I don't know if there's any really standout tracks. I did enjoy Cursed Realms track 3 quite a bit. That's a 10-minute one. Um, and then Orthodox Caveman as well is pretty good. Um, I was really in the vibe. There is one unfortunate thing in that, like the second song, the vocalist sounds exactly like Muscle Man, and that pulled me out of it so quickly. I When you have a spooky album like this, and I'm so in the atmosphere, and then you like feel like you're about to get like a my mom joke in there, it was a little it was a little off-putting and not in the way that I wanted to be off-put by this. But it's not an issue on any other track. It's just the first one that has vocals in it. I'm like, oh, I hope it doesn't sound like this the whole way through, and it does not. But it was just kind of funny. Um, but I think it's a solid entry into the group. I'm definitely like not too eager to jump into something like theirs discography wise because drone is such a it's a nothing genre, but it's a something genre at the same time. It's not one that you really do a deep dive on. It's just like, oh, I need something on in the background and I want this kind of vibe, throw on this kind of drone. It did not kind of like move me and change perceptions like something like Earth 2 did, where Earth 2 like reaches this level of distortion and just insanity and just like monumental soundscapes where when you turn it off, you feel like uncomfortable by how quiet it is around you. This does not reach that level, but it does succeed in giving a really kind of creepy and off-putting vibe. Um, so I think it's a good entry as the first one in the Halloween marathon. I wanted to start out with something like this because it is a little bit easier to kind of dip your toes in something like this, at least to me, because we are not really in disturbing territory or anything that is too shocking. I feel like with music, along with horror movies, like there is certain levels to this. This would be more of a, I don't know, atmospheric horror movie, one that isn't gory or anything, but one that sets a vibe. But I think for the following albums, we might get a little bit darker depending on how deep I want to go into that. I kind
Ooh.
of have a list picked out, but I'm kind of going off of vibes at the same time. So there won't be really like a here's what we're doing next. It'll just kind of be whatever I'm feeling. So,
Sure.
but yeah, good record. Check it out. Put it on your local haunted house. If you attract metalheads or something during your haunted houses at Halloween or something, um,
I guess.
they'd be into it. Okay, non spooky stuff. All right, this came out last week. This was a surprise drop. New Prem Rock EP with production by Willie Green, coming out of the Backwoods Studios label. This was a surprise drop that came out, yeah, I think it was a couple weeks ago. Really nice. It's just a simple 6 tracks. They already had the Shrapnel record this year, so surprising seeing Prem Rock have a little solo thing. But it turns out pretty great. There's not like too many standouts. I think the track with Curly Castro on it. What is that one? Call Abandonment Rate. It also has Def C on it. That one's really great. It might be just like a leftover from the Shrapnel record, but if even if it is, it's really great. Um, Fantastic. I love Willie Green's production style. He usually masters a lot of the Backwoods albums, so he masters most of Billy Wood's work that isn't on Fat Possum. But I don't really know him as a producer much. He has a very old school kind of '90s loop style. This comes across as a classic, just like New York underground EP, which is great. It doesn't do anything too flashy, but it definitely sets that kind of tone that you want from that kind of stuff. Um, I think Pink Cloud as well, the closer, is really fantastic. So, Prem Rock's always someone that I've enjoyed. I think he has just like a great presence, even live. Like live, he was doing the DJing himself. He was still doing really well on his own tracks. And yeah, it's definitely worth your time if you're into like more of this underground New York scene. If you're into Billy Woods and stuff, you'll probably be into this. It's all kind of somewhat connected. But his lyricism and stuff is always really refreshing. So yeah, check that out. Okay, first major record of the many major records I have to talk about. Okay, Shoo Shoo, new record. Um, Man, you cannot make this easy for me. 13-inch Frank Beltrame Italian stiletto with bison horn grips.
Oh.
What a name for an album. um, I did not know what I was getting into with this because it is a Shoo Shoo record, which immediately, if you know anything about Shoo Shoo, you kind of have to put your guard up before you do anything about it. The only other Shoo Shoo record I have heard is the Twin Peaks one, where they kind of revamp the Twin Peaks soundtrack. It is a phenomenal album. I really, really, really love it. It just takes the kind of dreamy soundscapes that Angelo Badalamenti, I think,
Hmm.
uh, put together for the soundtrack, and really adds this level of distortion and noise and kind of discomfort to it. And it's a phenomenal record. So I kind of knew their sound. I have not listened to Girl with Basket of Fruit or A Promise or Knife Play. Those are all records that have a reputation for really being messed up. I'm debating doing Girl with Brass Basket of Fruit for this marathon. Um, so I think someone it's a yikes on my wheel.
Yeah.
It's I don't it might be too uncomfortable to do for a video. So I
Okay.
might throw it in at like the last week of a Halloween marathon or something. Um, but this album is different in the fact that like it is not really that at all. It is just a really fun record, which is weird. It's this kind of neo psychedelia, really experimental, but still kind of industrial and noise rock record that comes across as just really fun. A lot of cool ideas. It's still definitely quirked up in left field, but at the same time, like it's nice listening to a record of theirs where I don't have to like mentally prepare myself for whatever they're gonna throw at me. It's just seems like they're just showing what they got. Um, and I think that turns out great because like sometimes I love the sound of these groups that are so intense and so forward thinking and so like lack of better word disturbing when it comes to their music where it's like I want something that is not something that's gonna like scare me off because I want something I can listen to just around. I don't need to like dive into this like horrible mental state to get into it. And I think this record kind of does that because you still get a lot of the great stuff that they do that at least I'm aware of. But yeah, lots of great stuff on here. I definitely need to listen to it more. I think this is like the beginning of the throes of the insanity of all the records that are coming out this month. So I think these are records I'm gonna have to sit with for a while before I really have set thoughts on them. But off the first couple of listens, really fun. The vocalist is fantastic. He does a great job. Um, Kind of like an older Bowie sound,
Hmm.
something like a little bit earlier than Black Star, but that kind of Bowie over like more experimental industrial music. It just works so well. Um, so yeah, check that out if you're into that lane. I'm sure you have if you are into experimental rock. They're kind of uh, not the biggest name, but people definitely know of them.
Yeah.
So okay, uh, let's talk about the Sophie record. So this came out. I forgot this came out.
Oh yeah.
Um, So this is a self-titled posthumous record. It is an hour long, and I feel like this is one where I'm gonna be talking about the music the least, and I'm gonna be talking about everything else more. Um, so this was interesting because I talked about a little bit of this in the lead up to this record. Um, I think her brother put this together. He said it was mostly finished, and they just had to kind of put it together and put it out into the world as a posthumous release. So we were under the impression that this is the family doing this. It seems like, you know, under their guard. They put out Reason Why as the first single, and people were into it and they were excited for this thing. Um, there's been five singles, I think, for this. I've only listened to the one, to kind of mixed reviews. Um, I'm
Hmm.
not like the biggest. I've listened to, you know, Oil of Every Pearl's On Insides, and it's phenomenal. And I've obviously heard some of her production on other things, Vince Staples Records, Arca Records, Charlie Records. Um, I wouldn't say I'm like incredibly well versed in her sound. I can pick out a Sophie beat most likely, but it's not one that I've like really studied and know. Um, so this thing came out and it got incredibly mixed reviews immediately, and so that I was like, okay, am I even going to listen to this? I'm not really sure why.
Hmm.
I would if it's going to be like disingenuous or anything.
Yeah.
Um, but I noticed a lot of people giving it like 20s and 30s and saying like, "Oh, you ruined her legacy" and all
Oh.
these different things. And I'm like, okay, I need to listen to this now because what is happening? Um, so the record isn't terrible by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think. Um, I think there's a lot of things that kind of lead to a reaction like this, um, because it does, for the most part, sound like Sophie production. Um, I think I do believe the family when they say this was mostly done, and that they didn't do too much to it. They just kind of had to put the finishing touches and put it together. I do believe that. Um, I think people were expecting something completely different than what they got, and I think that is a cause for thinking that there was some foul play or disingenuous statements about it. Um, it's a very, it's just a very different soundscape than her last record. Obviously, one of the best, you know, just hyper pop, this kind of lane albums there is, incredibly influential. We do not get any of Charlie's like releases in the past 5 years without this record. And a myriad of other artists. Like if you do not have oil of every pearls on its sides, none of those really exist. Um,
Mm.
so I think people were expecting something like incredibly forward thinking and off the wall like that, and that's not what you really get here. It's very minimal at parts, which is weird because she is known as kind of a maximalist when it comes to production. There's a reason why she's on all those Arca records. I think she has like one of the most insane sounding Arca songs on I think Kick One. Um, and I think coming into this, it's like okay, you start and it's pretty ambient and there's not a whole lot going on. It still sounds great to me. Like I'm loving just the kind of space and the way she's playing with all these different little elements to build a little bit of a vibe. You still have tracks going forward. Um, and I think the weird part is that she's mixing ambient with more, I don't want to say mainstream, but more traditional EDM and kind of house music. Um, and those two kind of clash together. And I do actually like the artistic merit in that because you have such a broad range of like emotions and moods to play on when you go from ambient to house. And I think there are moments on the record that work pretty well. Um, I think there are also ones though where it's like Sophie does not really appear vocally on any of these. It is mostly all features doing vocal work or spoken word or anything like that. Um, I think that's strike one against it, and I think in general this record should not have been put out because I think this was Sophie's vision for her next record, but that doesn't necessarily mean the record is going to be really good or groundbreaking. I think when it comes to a posthumous album, if the artist is not able to finish it, or if they do not have the final say of it going out, then it should probably not go out because people are going to think this ruins her legacy when really this might just be the sound she went for and her brother went in and cleaned it up for her.
Yeah.
Um, and without the context of marketing or music videos or any of the stuff, I don't know how far along like the cover art or anything was in. Like all of that stuff plays into how viewers experience and anticipate albums. Um, Especially when you give us Reason Why as the first single, when it is the most traditional Sophie sounding song. But then you have all these other songs here that are not. Um, so I think it's this balance of like fan expectations with the incredibly sensitive topic of a posthumous release, which we've seen a million of them that are cash grabs and awful. I mean, they're still trying to play with Juice World and get even more out of his back catalog,
Ugh.
um, which is gross. I understand the frustration and the disappointment from people on this record, but at the same time, I feel like this might have been her vision, and this is just the way she was going. This isn't an album that's going to define a career. Sometimes there are albums like that. You put one out and it's not a dud, but it's an artist trying something different, and sometimes it doesn't always resonate, and you move on to the next one. With
Hmm.
a posthumous release, you do not have that opportunity. This is the final say. And this record does not feel like a final say, so I think people are kind of mad at it. And that's just the risk you take with this. I don't think this album should have been released. Do I enjoy it? I think it's pretty decent. And some of the songs are definitely not great at all. And it feels weird on a posthumous album to have some of these featured artists and the content and everything on it is just not great. Especially when it comes to pacing. You have the intro, which is just this really gorgeous kind of ambient piece that's kind of like dark and brooding, and then you have Raw right after it, which is just, let's just say, the very opposite of that. um, yeah, it's a very weird release. And I think when it comes to that stuff, it's very touchy when it comes to posthumous. I think Mac Miller's Circles is literally like one of the only posthumous records that can stand up as a normal album because he got lucky. I'm going to say that he got lucky with the direction he was going and that it sounded like this. And he also kind of knew it was coming. So I'm sure he had those thoughts on his mind when coming up with records like that. But with something like this, it is just literally a grab bag. It's something that probably shouldn't have been messed with and something that probably shouldn't have been released. But I don't think it is like a disservice to her catalog at all. I think this is just a record that she was working on. It wasn't like this grand statement. It was just an album that was getting put together, and it was way different than people were expecting, and they were not very happy about that. So it's a sticky situation. I don't really have a side on it. I just think it should not have really been out.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, it was weird though because I was expecting going in to like be offended by the time I was done, but I'm like, no, that sounds like an album that someone would put out. There's nothing too horrendous about this. It's just a really different direction for an artist like this. Um, but yeah, that's my thoughts. I guess someone who's more connected with this scene, tell me why this is such a controversial thing. This is kind of me trying, like, from what I'm seeing from an outside perspective, this is kind of what I'm feeling.
Mm.
Um, but maybe there's some other things that I'm missing here. But it seemed like an overreaction on a lot of people's part. Um, but I mean, the more I'm on the album of the year and more people get introduced to album of the year, there are a lot more, let's say, exaggerations both ways. It did not used to be like this even a year ago. It's gotten, I think it's gotten a lot more popular. I think Letterboxd and all these sites are getting a lot more popular now, especially with like Gen Z and stuff.
Yeah.
We like our lists and we like rating things, and these are good things because they find, artists find people in different ways, and you're able to kind of expand your taste and put words to why you like something or don't. I think that's all great. I think we're seeing a large influx of people though, and the ratings change every week when something comes out, for better or for worse. Um, but yeah, those are my thoughts on that. Okay. I think that was it from the past week. So we'll go to October 4th now, the big week, um, of many big weeks this month. So we'll start with the Smile, cutouts. So this is their second record this year, which is crazy that I'm even saying that. Time York also put out a solo record for a movie soundtrack, so he's done three full length things this year, which is crazy. Um, so cutouts is essentially cutouts from the first two records. These are songs that they've been playing live since the very beginning of the Smile, or ones that I'm assuming just did not fit into track lists for either of the albums, and they just wanted to kind of offload them or continue working on them for this one. Um, so 10 songs, it is 44 minutes. It's about the same as the other ones, so it is a full length one. Um, and it is really solid. It's definitely weirder. I think they take a lot of risks on this one, and I think most of them pay off. Um, Definitely a little bit more. There's not as many like standout moments as there are on the other two records. Don't think it was really meant for that. They're playing a lot more with like kind of IDM electronic stuff, but also playing into that krautrock that they really did on Wall of Eyes, and kind of some mashups of in between. Um, and a lot of them kind of come off pretty well. I think the Smiles group is very strange because they're so good at what they do that it's almost boring, and that's a weird way to say that a record is great because it is great, and these songs are cool. They sound really different and weird. I think we're definitely still in the Smile phase where they have come up with their sound that differentiates them from Radiohead, because this does not sound like Radiohead at all. So they've succeeded in that with Wall of Eyes, and I think they've taken it further with this. But yeah, it's like so put together, and all like the three of these guys are so incredibly uber talented at what they do that it is almost boring how good these songs are. I think that comes at the expense of Tom York not really like. I don't have any emotional connection with Tom York's writing on like any of the Smile records. There's a couple songs on Wall of Eyes that do make sense, and I was like actually able to put together a little bit of a narrative on that, which I think is why I like it the most. Um, but there's just no emotional connection. It sounds almost like robotic in a weird way. Like very run of the mill. Like these are Tom York songs, but we're putting Johnny's crazy guitar work and Tom Skinner's insane drumming on it, and we're kind of just kind of going. But they all do still seem like ideas that were just kind of popped out. With Radiohead records, you get these grand narratives and statements and lyrics that hit hard, and there's always like a grand purpose for the record that they put out. The Smile is not really like that. I think it's just three dudes that are like, I don't want to say past their prime, but getting up there in age, just kind of like noodling around on instruments and putting out records. And they all sound great. It's just you do not get that emotional connection that makes Radiohead so good on top of that. Um,
Mm.
and that's just something you guys just kind of have to confront, because the Smile will never be that. Um, but These songs sound great. They're cool. They're really quirky. Zero Sum is still one of the best songs I've heard all year. It is off the wall insane. It's so close to not working. It's crazy. I feel like a lot of these tracks are like they're so close to falling apart, but they're just holding it together so thinly that it just works really well. Um, I think Instant Psalm is also another favorite. I love the more like slower acoustics, and then we're kind of building up into this more weird soundscape that they're playing with. Colors Fly is great. No Words sounds like a new metal Tool song, which is crazy. So yeah, there's a lot of great moments on it. It's a really fun record, and I do love the kind of more atmospheric, almost ambient stuff that they're doing on it. But at the same time, it's not too memorable. I don't know.
Mm,
I'm very conflicted on. I think this and Wall of Eyes too, as we're getting closer to the end of the year, because like I do rank these pretty high, but at the same time, they're not incredibly memorable, and they're like made by three veterans that clean these things up so well that it's almost hard to notice the great subtleties that they're doing in these things. Um, so I think I just have to take that into account as we get closer to list
mm,
week, list time.
of
Um,
course.
but both the records they put out this year, pretty great. I don't know. It's it's such a weird feeling. I'm like, this album is really good, but I don't really remember a lot of it. Um, yeah,
That's a
uh,
very interesting predicament you found yourself in.
it is. It is, and it doesn't stop there. Um,
Oh,
let's talk
okay.
about Greep,
Creep?
the Greep man, the Greeper. Uh, yeah, Black Midi frontman. Uh, Pretty much directly after Black Midi split up, put out the single for this record and then released this record,
Oh.
um, which made me feel like he just had it done, which he probably did. Um, so yeah, we had the single "Holy Holy," and then this came out this Friday. "Holy Holy" is pretty great. This kind of Steely Dan esque kind of Latin jazz rock fusion weirdo stuff. Um, and the whole record's kind of like this. It's an hour and 2 minutes. It's 11 tracks. Um, really plays into this kind of jazz rock fusion with prog elements. Um, it still kind of carries the wildness and unpredictableness that Black Midi records do, but without the kind of harsh experimental nature of those records with insane drumming and crazy guitar parts and these kind of overwhelming soundscape. This one has a weird kind of lounge, Latin, summery, chill kind of vibe to it. Um, and I think the instrumentals just themselves like sound fantastic. They sound so good. Um, I'm not sure everybody who plays on this, but they they definitely do a great job. Like the sound palette is just really nice. Um, as far as just like what this album is and everything, I'm still trying to figure out a little bit. People are going crazy for this thing.
Hmm.
And it does sound crazy, and it is like you immediately get in and you're like, whoa, what is going on? So much happening, which is kind of similar to a Black Midi record. Um, but this one has Greep kind of playing almost the same as Hellfire again. These kind of like scummy characters, like the worst of the worst. Crazy lyricism and insane lyrics that are just like really strange. Um, Holy Holy was kind of this, from what I picture, just like this really pitiful man who has to pay for a woman to like act like his partner at a bar so he can like attract other people. There's just kind of like predatory figure.
Mm.
And he kind of plays into this for this whole record. I think the cover makes sense of like this peasant woman beheading this big businessman with what looks like a Minecraft diamond hoe,
It does
which is
look
just a great addition.
like
um, so yeah, this whole record just kind of like plays into the narrator, him being this kind of scummy businessman or like con man who's in it to like take advantage of women or objectify women and all these horrible, terrible things. Um, I don't have an issue with that, but I think it gets really uncomfortable and hard to listen to when it sounds like a Steely Dan song is playing underneath. With
that.
Hellfire, it all fit in perfectly and as this like theatrical, dark, brooding, almost like Lovecraftian experience where you have this like heavy, distorted guitar riffs and this insane drumming and all these crazy things happening. It sounded dark and demented, and the stories that Greep was telling on those fit that. With this one, there's this disconnect of like, uh, your dad's stereo on a Sunday, but with
Mm,
like this horrible, horrible man on top of it, just like saying the most ridiculous and sexist things possible, playing
mm,
into this character. And there's a really weird dissonance there for me. I'm surprised more people don't find this as uncomfortable as I do. I was
mm.
really uncomfy listening to these songs like in depth with the lyricism going because I'm like, this is really weird. Um, I think because it's weird because I appreciate this record because it is really tight in that the instrumentation's fantastic. His writing is great. He plays any of these characters very well. You want to hate the guy, and you do, as he plays into just all of these like scummy things. And it works all as a thing, but it's like, do I want to listen to that? I
Mm,
don't know if I do. Um, because I mean, even Holy Holy is uncomfortable to listen to, and that's the single. Um, just the lyrics and the ways he's portraying this. I don't want to say he's going too far. I think he's doing it in the way he does it with his kind of eccentric, vocal strings and all of this thing. It works. It's just like at the end of the day, I don't know if I want to listen to that because it is incredibly uncomfortable to get this kind of Latin fusion where everything just sounds really nice and clean, and then you're talking about like taking advantage of women and stuff on it. It's just like
mm.
really weird. But with that being said, the magician is just incredible. I know everybody was waiting for this one, the 12.5 minute track near the end. Incredible build. It is phenomenal. Um, it's yeah, it's the best track on this record by far. Um, but yeah, I think there is a disconnect for me here where it's like I really appreciate how I don't know. It's a really well made record with incredible instrumentation, and he definitely knows how to write and craft these like kind of short little stories that I really loved him doing on Hellfire. But I think I appreciate Hellfire a lot more because it plays into that darkness and it plays into this more demented theatrical thing that they put on with that record, and I think everything just works with it because I know what I'm getting with it. The sound matches how deep he's going.
Mm.
Here, it sounds like your dad's, uh, you know vinyl record collection of Steely Dan and all these different kind of influences like that, with the same kind of lyricism on top.
Mm.
It's I think it's almost like an American Psycho thing too,
Oh.
where certain people might play into it as not satire or not commenting on the thing
Mhm.
because I think he is so convincing with some of these and the way that he kind of um, portrays himself and even just the tone of voice he's using it is that very 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 fine line of like this feels like an American Psycho or that kind of thing,
Yeah.
where people could latch onto it in a way that is not intended, but it's still really great, but I it's not something I really want to listen to. It's weird
That's
because
fair.
I don't know, but I still love Hellfire. I think Hellfire is just like the perfect combination of all those things. um, So I do really miss Black Midi. All of them in that group are just incredibly talented. Um, I do hope they kind of find another spot to end up in. I think Morgan Simpson is still like he might be like the best drummer alive. He needs to find somewhere else to go
Yeah.
because that kind of talent cannot be just kind of done after this 3 album run that they did. Cameron is also incredibly talented as well, so I do hope they find somewhere. Um, it feels like Greep might have been the one that like really broke off Black Midi. It's certainly definitely it feels like that with this record because of how like charismatic and crazy he is on it. But
Mm.
that could also just be his stage thing. I'm not sure. But I do miss Black Midi. This is a really great record by him, but it's not something that I'm really into. So
Sure.
that's how I feel about it. Um, okay, we got one big one
Oh.
next. I will say, Chat Pile comes out next week. Um, I got it at my local record store a week early. The guy did not know that it came out next week and not this week, so I do have an early copy of this. But I'm not going to talk about
Oh.
it the next week.
Oh, okay. Because you're a
Yeah.
coward.
Yes. Also, I didn't listen to it because I had way too much to listen to
Oh.
already. But I do have it. So that'll be coming next week. That I could honestly potentially do this as my Halloween album next week because
Mm.
Chat Pile is pretty much in that kind of lane. So I might do a cop out and count that as one, and then do another Halloween one. So I'll do two for. But alrighty, let's get to the big guy. Godspeed record, new one. No title as of 13 February 2024. 28,340 dead. Such a catchy title. We'll
Yeah.
just be calling it no title. Um, so this is the first record from them in 3 years. Godspeed was the last one. A record that I really appreciated after seeing them live. They did a lot of the songs from this live last time I saw them, and really gained a new appreciation for the record. The intensity and just the crescendos that they get on that record is really great, and I don't think people have really given that record the time of day yet. But this one is getting a lot of attention, and I think, definitely a good thing. I feel like they haven't really had this kind of reception since a while ago. People are really digging this thing. It is 6 songs, about an hour long. Um, where do I start with this thing? Um, Differences from the other Godspeed records. I assumed and I thought that like these would be big movements broken into separate songs because streaming services like it when you break out songs. Because if there's 3 songs on an album, they're not going to want to classify it as an album, so people break up their things. That's not the case here. I think 2 songs flow into each other, but all the rest are single movements and statements, which is new for them. Usually, it is like 2 or 3 really long songs broken up into sections. This one is actually like, song after song, like a traditional album would be. Um, which I was like, I'm not a big fan of that, but at the same time, like with these songs, it works really well. Um, I do like their long, kind of overdrawn movements, but they haven't really done that in a while in a way that's successful. Um, but I think just going through the tracks, the first track, "Sun as a Whole, Sun as Vapors," is absolutely gorgeous. Um, I think hearing them live, they do this kind of hope drone that they come out to. It's a slow one where they start and nobody's on stage, and then one by one they walk out and start on their instruments until they build up this just kind of drone and into this kind of beginning movement that they do at every show. This kind of reminded me of that. Starts out very kind of spacey and airy. You have this great guitar riff that just kind of punctures through, um, and it's just gorgeous. Like it feels already in the first track just refreshing and a step forward for them. Um, I think a lot of the early half of this record reminds me of Lift Your Skinny Fists in the way that it is uplifting and kind of almost spiritual in the way that everything kind of comes together, which is not something I was really expecting. Going into this record, I expected the absolute worst because of the subject matter. It is not a fun topic or anything to really cover, and it's one that needs to take tremendous care if you're making your whole album kind of surrounding this thing. So I was curious to see how they were going to do it, how they were going to approach it. I think Godspeed post hiatus has a different outlook on how they make records in multiple different ways, but I think the kind of hopeful, anthemic kind of, want to be kind of inspirational and uplifting in their messaging comes into this record as well, which I think is great. I think you need that when it comes to something this tough, when it comes to subject matter. I think it takes a while to kind of prepare yourself for whatever you're going to get into with this thing as well. So I was really just like, all right, I'm going to sit down and listen and see what happens. I was expecting something just like so terrifying and dark that it was just really going to hit me. Um, but the first song is just gorgeous. It perfectly opens the record. Um, and then we really get into the thick of it. So we have Babies in a Thundercloud, track 2.
Oh,
Yeah, 13 and a half minutes. Traditional Godspeed song length. Although, depending on where you get your Godspeed enjoyment from, this would be a shorter track in the earlier days. Um, but this one, oh my God, this might be the best song they put out in 20 years. Um, it's like beyond words. This is one where it's just like, wow. I was 2 songs in and it finished, and I'm like, oh my god, how do you go on for more than that? I would have been happy with just this song. It's incredible. There's an evolution in their sound here that like it's hard to describe, but the way they're playing with feedback and um, reverb and all these things is different. There's this kind of weird drone that builds on this that kind of sounds like when jets pass overhead. There's just weird kind of like wispy quality to it. Um, and this incredibly memorable like guitar riff that comes in, like you instantly recognize it and it gets stuck in your head. And there's just a phenomenal build. You have some kind of jazz drumming underneath it and a bass line that hits. um and the build they reach here is just, oh my god, like I almost rewound this song like the first time I heard it. I'm like, this is incredible. um this sounds like peak Godspeed from like, 2000 or 2002. It really is just a phenomenal track. A lot of like with the Godspeed records, uh, I was thinking about doing a Godspeed deep dive video after I do my Mount Erie one next year or whatever. But it's like a lot of this you kind of just have to experience for yourself. It's hard to kind of talk about in terms, kind of like the Drone album we were talking about earlier. It's
Mm.
hard to do it when it's just these abstract waveforms at the end of the day. Um, but man, the emotion and everything, it has a hopeful quality, but there's just kind of like when you've, exhausted everything emotionally and you just have this like one moment of clarity and you're just so exhausted and everything, but you keep going. It's just that kind of vibe on the track. It's perfect. It's phenomenal. Um, and after that, we have Raindrops Cast in Lead, which does not let up at all. We have these really like eerie, like not bird. It sounds like a mechanical bird chirp or like a hinge that is like way too squeaky, and you have just these like weird pinging sounds for the first beginning of it. Um, it kind of builds slowly into this nice guitar part. Definitely more downtrodden than the last track. There's still this kind of optimistic quality underneath it, which is just really great. Um, and builds into not quite as memorable of a build as Babies in a Thundercloud, but it is still pretty great. Um, this is one of the only Godspeed songs ever that does have a spoken word part in it. Um, it's spoken in Spanish. I don't know who the person is who is doing it. Um, but it's a really really beautiful poem. I don't have it in front of me right now, but you can look it up yourselves. I recommend listening to the track while doing it too. It's just moving. It's incredibly powerful, like everything else on this record is. um, this one definitely kind of carries a little bit more of a mournful tone to it. I do like that they're kind of playing with space a little bit again. I think my criticism of like the more recent records, I think especially like Luciferian Towers, um, there's always like a kind of main motif and rock thing going on with it. They don't play with atmosphere as much as I like from the earlier records. I think they kind of bring that back here, and it works really well. Um, so yeah, that's another phenomenal track. Just incredibly aggressive build at the end too. The level of distortion and noise they reach on it is fantastic. Um, then we have the next twofer is Broken Spires at Dead Capital, and then Pale Spectator Takes Photographs. These two are a connected pair of songs. Broken Spires is only 3 minutes, and then Pale Spectator is 11. Why they broke it up into two, I don't really know why they could have kept this as one. If you're gonna do, single song movements, you can do that. Um, but I don't really care. It's just interesting that I came up with that. Although this album is communicating all of its feelings through the song titles and the album title, which is what they often do. So I think it does make sense at that point. Um, this is where we get like really, you get really into it, and it is uh, pretty desolate, pretty mournful, pretty terrifying. Broken Spires is more of an ambient piece, but it is. I think this captures a more desolate, kind of unnerving soundscape better than the spooky album I talked about earlier. It's ominous how kind of broken this song feels. Um, I think the violins do a great job on this one, kind of building into what Pale Spectator is. Um, and then Pale Spectator being probably, this is like almost Swan's level of post rock kind of terror, I would say. Um, there's this incredibly ominous, I don't know what it is. It's not, I think it's the violin played through like some form of distortion, but it gives off this incredibly eerie, almost like horror movie sting that kind of becomes the main center point for the track, and it hurts. It is incredibly moving. And terrifying. It builds kind of the desolate nature for this track as it builds. You have these kind of Yankee-esque drums that are kind of like marching to war through it as it slowly builds, and yeah, it gets terrifying as it goes through. Another fantastic track. This is definitely more Yankee focused, which I was kind of expecting this record to go into. Yankee being the kind of prelude to Iraq Invasion album that came out in 2002. Um, that one definitely sounds more militaristic and stays in that lane. The vinyl version of that one has this terrifying, like, cut up George Bush speech as a hidden track on the back of it that just terrified me because I did not know it was on there. Um, so this is probably their most politically like focused since then, and it definitely shows with these tracks, and I think it just amplifies all of the feelings you get from this thing. Um, and then Grey Rebel Green Shoots, that was a single. I've talked about this. It does not blend into a movement like I thought it would. It's a little bit of an awkward transition, but it still kind of works at the end of the day. Um, I think the only thing that does drag this album down a little bit is like the closer is not as monumental as you want it to be. Um, Grey Rebel is kind of, again, hitting this more hopeful but also like terrifying, like we have to push through this kind of vibe, and then the end is pretty desolate, and I think respectfully it feels like a very respectful kind of eulogy at the end of the record. um but I do feel like the track is too short. I really wanted to kind of like sit in that kind of feeling at the end of a record, but I didn't really get that. um but then I went and bought the vinyl, uh, and got the Chat Pilot vinyl early,
Ooh.
because there was a special song on the D side of this, and I'm like, okay, I have to buy this. I was gonna wait till the show that I'm going to buy it, but I'm like, if there's a secret song, I'm buying it.
Yeah.
So yeah, the entire D side of the record is almost completely full. There's barely any runoff, so it's about a 18-minute track. Um, I think it is. People are just calling it no title, so we can call it the title track, I suppose, of a no title album. Um, it takes the kind of musical motif that Green Shoots has at the end and buries it under layers of like chilling distortion and feedback, and creates like an ambient drone piece that like it that's the outro that needed to be on the the version on Spotify. I think people would really like this record a little bit more if that was on it. Um, it is a powerful outro. It sounds like Great Green Shoots if you just like, you know, if it's just rubble. Like there's no other way to describe it. It's just destroyed, and it just goes on and on and on in this kind of like disintegrating almost loop of a secret song. And that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted that kind of vibe to really cast us out and just drag it out. I think Grey Rebel Green Shoots should just be combined with that, and it should just be a 20-minute song to kind of end this thing. I don't know why they don't have this on streaming as part of it. I know they do a lot of vinyl specific things in a lot of their releases, but I do think it would genuinely like help with perception if you had this 20-minute piece at the end, because it is just incredibly powerful.
Mm.
Um, but overall, this thing is like, it's phenomenal. I think it's their best work since Yankee in 2002. Definitely their best work post hiatus. I know Alleluia is one that people still like a lot. I think that was made mainly pre hiatus, but they held on to it for 10 years for whatever reason. That is a really great record. I do enjoy that, but I don't know that this hits really hard. I think it's probably outside of like the big three trilogy. I think this is their best record outside of that.
Cool.
Um, yeah, incredible. It's definitely give it a listen. It's just incredibly moving and powerful and hopeful and desolate and all of these different things just wrapped into one. I think it perfectly encapsulates just the how horrible of a landscape we're in right now.
Yeah.
um, everything is just breaking and crumbling, and I don't know. This is the kind of the perfect soundtrack to that. I think they do their best work when they have this kind of urgency and contextual kind of framework that this thing has. I think making an album based on this subject matter, you have to do it very carefully, and I think they're like the number one group that I would trust with something like this. They've done it time and time again, and it comes out great. Um, Nothing crazy on the packaging like this one. Yankee is still a crazy album to get on vinyl because you see the back and it's just a of a chart of like all the biggest music labels and their ties to like Lockheed Martin and the State Department and
Oh.
all the way down to where the bombs are getting dropped.
Hmm.
Or their I think New Canada EP. It tells you how to make a Molotov cocktail on the back of it.
Oh, nice.
So there's nothing as crazy like that on there, but they do have some really great. The statement they released with the album is gorgeous, and the kind of pieces of merch that they're selling and the little notes that they do put inside the record are really fantastic. I do love the art direction overall with it as well. So yeah, definitely check it out. It is finally dethroned something for my top album of the year. That could also get dethroned by any week this month though, and the following month. So um, pretty crazy month, and it's the first week of it. So I think next week we have Chat Pile, and we have what's the other one that comes out? We have the Brat remix album that comes out.
Oh, hell.
Um, we did
Blade.
get yes, we did get the track list for that. Bon Iver is on it.
Oh, I
So
didn't know that.
yeah, Bon Iver, Caroline Polachek, Young Lean, Blade. Um, who else is on this? I think yeah, Julian Casablancas from The Strokes.
I loved him.
So uh, yeah, there'll be those two to talk about. But yeah, the Godspeed one did become victorious when it came to the crazy week of this year. Um, I kind of thought it would, but it was open to any three of those albums kind of being the standout. But yeah, this thing is moving. Um, and today is October 7th, isn't it? That's crazy.
It sure
Um,
is.
yeah, it's been a year of this. That's insane. But yeah, I think that when they first announced this album, it's like war is coming. Pick a side, and I talked about this last podcast. I'm like, we'll probably be in a regional war by the time we do a next podcast, and here we are, and it's pretty much happening. It's just
Yeah.
not official technically. So yeah, horrifying, terrible things. I am seeing them in concert. Beginning of November, right after the election. So
Oh,
that might be the
nice.
best show I ever go to in my entire life. But yeah, that's
Probably.
music. Hmm.
That's music. I think every good musical discussion should end with a proclamation of regional war.
Yes,
I think that's good.
that's how you know when the music is good.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I don't think I've listened to a whole lot of new stuff. Actually, strike that. I listened to Dark Times by Vince Staples because you recommended it to me in our
Hmm.
retrospective because we were talking about the new JPEG Mafia album and you recommended Vince Staples' most recent album. I think this is the one you were talking about, not Ramona
Yes.
Park. And I really, really, really liked it. Um, yeah, I'm definitely interested to kind of go back and kind of go through all of his things. The only thing that I was like a little bit weird on, where there's like the Liars song, where it's like all women lie, and I'm like I don't that feels weird. Like that's like a 2017 Juice World song or something. Like
Right.
I don't know. Kind of felt out of place in an otherwise kind of great hip hop record. I don't know.
Hmm.
I need to go back and listen to it a little bit more, but I just remember that one standing out to me a little bit when I saw it. Um,
Yeah,
but
with
yeah,
Vince, it's always more nuanced than that. I think I listened to that record and then I watched the Vince Staples show and I'm like the two feel very intertwined in a way.
really? Because isn't that like all
Yeah,
funny?
it kind of.
Okay.
Um,
I thought it was like a
not
sketch show.
it's kind of a sketch show, but kind of not.
Okay.
It's kind of similar to Atlanta in the way that they play with
Mm,
comedy, where it's not really comedy.
gotcha. Okay, well, I might have to check that out. Um, I've been
I'd recommend.
rewatching Breaking Bad, but maybe I'll check out the Vince Staples show. How many episodes are there?
Like 6.
Oh, okay. So maybe
It's
I'll.
really easy. You could do it in a day.
Okay, I'll just do it in a day. Okay.
It did get
Uh
renewed for a second season though.
oh, nice. Well, good on you, Vince.
So
I enjoyed your record. Maybe I'll check out. Maybe I should just go backwards and just do Ramona Park next because I know a lot of people like that one too.
hmm yeah, I think
Um,
going backwards would be probably the best way to do it at this point.
okay. Don't go all the way back to Big Fish Theory or anything else
Big Fish is crazy. Um, you can listen to Yeah Right that has Kendrick on it. That's a crazy song.
on Big Fish.
Yeah,
Oh, sweet.
that's a Sophie produced Vince Staples and Kendrick song.
That okay, that sounds wild.
But yeah, Summertime '06 is the one that most people know him for.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that one I
North
know is
North.
the North on that. Yeah, I don't know. Might check it out. It's very sweet and cool. But I think that's pretty much it. I've been very busy, as I said. But I am very excited because we are going to be doing In Lieu of Flowers on the channel.
Yes, sir.
So that'll be good. Look forward to that. If you're already getting into the emo stuff with your, I've already forgot the concert you went to, Foxing, then you'll like it probably.
Exactly.
So it's all good. But you should check out our reaction on Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots by the Flaming
Yes, sir.
Lips, which is out right now. Very, very good record. I actually need to go back and listen to it.
Oh yeah, I've been listening to that as much as I can with all these new releases.
Yeah, I need to listen to it again because I'm excited to. It was great. Spoilers for the video, but it was very good.
It's out. You gotta watch it.
It's out. You should check it out. Um, but yeah, that one was kind of a wonky video because Spotify was down when we were recording it,
hmm
but I think we made it work.
Yeah,
Fine.
I kept all the 3, 2, 1s that had a
Okay.
little bit of, you know, we're
Something.
being real.
Okay. It adds some authenticity to our video.
Exactly. It's the only video that'll have that because Spotify was down like nationwide, I think.
Yeah, it was like it came back like halfway through, but at that point it
hmm
was just like, we're
Yeah.
already doing it. But yeah, I don't. I think maybe there's been a couple videos where we've had to do something like that, but that's mostly because like the stuff isn't on Spotify.
Yeah, that's usually for like our little community videos that we need to do another one of those
Yeah,
soon.
I don't know. It's a little oddity, but I don't think we'll have to do that with In Lieu of Flowers. But I can't tell
No,
the
I doubt
future, and it might be down again next week. So who
it.
knows?
Just when we record.
Yes, as it should be. But yeah, I think that'll do it for this podcast. If you're interested in following the Romero-ween thing, I think I will be watching Creep Show next week. So if you want to get in on the horror anthology game, then we'll be talking about that, and I'm excited. So there's that. But I think with that, that's it. Unless you have something more to say.
I always got more to say, but I
Oh,
don't.
okay. Oh, okay. Fair enough. Bye bye.